make it so blindingly simple, you almost can't do it because it's so damn simple. That ease, that simplicity it's kind of a winning formula for creating a new habit.
I'm Amy Woodall, and this is The Conscious Habit, a show from the People Forward Network. We're teaching you how to incorporate love and consciousness at work, at home, and the world at large. I'm Amy Woodall, and you're listening to the Conscious Habit Podcast. Today, my dear friend, Deseri Garcia, the founder of Vida Aventura, joins me as co-host. Together, we host the High Vibe Tribe retreats. We founded these retreats to have magical, transformational experiences for women in the highest vibe places around the world. And this new co-hosted series with Des and me is really intended to share more of our collective consciousness work to help you take a deep dive inside yourself and to elevate your vibe and your experience on this planet. Take a listen. Ooh, Conscious Habit listeners, I am so excited because it's really like a kickoff. This is the first episode of several more where you will hear Deseri Garcia and I get together and talk about a topic. So when Des and I were planning this episode, our first couple, and I said, what do you want to talk about? Like, what's on your heart? She mentioned habits. And I was like, oh, I love that. Man, in my life, have I had so many bad habits to break. I still have plenty more to go, but I've had to really rework my relationship. And my outcomes really all stem from what I hold sacred. So, Des, thank you for, even mentioning wanting to do this topic. I think it's going to be so important for our listeners. What was it about this topic for you that had you like leaning in and being like, yep, that's got to be the one we start off with?
It was, timeliness. Like the first of the year has come, and we're in it now. We're in 2024, and just reflecting on, for me, Amy, it was really like, what have been the foundational habits that have really served me, and they really springboard into some of the other practices and habits that have helped me along the way. And also, as you said, that reflection of those habits that I'd really like to change. And I think that, like our listeners and folks that we work with, sometimes that can be a big struggle. So I thought it's just a timely opportunity for us to talk about this topic.
Totally. And a good reminder too, because listeners, you're hearing this in February, which means we've hit past that first month, which a lot of times we get that like surge of energy of like, it's new. And I have this new renewed, found excitement and motivation. And then February kicks in and we're like, it's cold and gray and winter sucks. And I'm busy. Like life starts to kick us in the teeth a little bit and we can start to revert backwards. But, I think if you and I, and again, our reflection of just what keeps us in the midst of life feeling chaotic or the things outside of us, like what are those sacred practices, rituals, habits that allow us to just be more resilient? And then how the hell do you hold on to them? Because there is that sort of stop, start that can come through. So can we start off with your habits, Des? Like, what are those? If I'm peeking in on Des in a day, that's a good one. DD. Dawn. Des in a day. What
D
is
in a day.
what are the things that I'm going to witness that is like, oh, these are the really important things for her, kind of her non-negotiables?
And I'm going to preface this, Amy, by saying that the habits that I have that are foundational, I sometimes fall off on these, and some are so foundational now that I had to kind of think about them, because I like, if it's something worthwhile, I make it's a habit until it becomes a part of how I do me. So a big one that, and I know our High Vibe Tribe and many of like the clients that I work with, and I'm sure we'll talk about this along the way on the podcast, is my TSRW practice. So stands for This Shit Really Works. And it's really my morning ritual. And it's the foundation of it is to prepare myself mentally, emotionally, spiritually for the day. And I really don't know who I would be without that practice. It just has made the biggest difference in how I approach my day, who I am, and the things that I feel that I've been able to enjoy and love and manifest in my life. So that one's huge. And then simpler ones, like one that I'm working on now, like hydration has always been one, eating well. And trust me, like I don't everything that I put in my mouth isn't the greatest thing to put in my mouth, but I really try to focus on.
Like the beer we had at lunch
Yeah,
yesterday.
exactly, exactly. I typically at least 4 or 5 days a week, I'm I'm working out. Whether that is some type of aerobic, lifting, yoga, or a combination of that. And the other big one for me in addition to that TSRW is a practice around learning. So I typically will watch, listen, or read something that teaches me each day. What are yours?
Yeah, man, I'm with you on I thought that was so well said of like there are things that become so a part of who you are. They are hardwired in your subconscious that you have to kind of stop and create distance to be like, "Oh, right, that's a thing." Kind of like trying to teach a kid how to ride a bike. It's like hard you just do it instinctually. Like, I don't know how to break this down for you. And I think similar with some of the habits, but I just want to share before I go in like a preface to say one of the things I had to change, and this has been 9 years ago or so, I realized I had a horrible relationship with the word discipline. Like if somebody would have said, "What does discipline mean to you?" I would be like, "It means you have a stick up your ass. It means you're rigid. It means somebody's got you under their thumb." I had such a poor relationship with it. No surprise, I'm a rebellious middle child. We can
Yeah,
talk about that on another therapy episode, but
exactly.
you know, I didn't like anyone telling me what to do, even myself. And it showed in all areas of life. This is the first one I heard the expression, how you do anything is how you do everything. You're the first one I ever heard say that. And it really was a reflection in my life. I had all of these aspirations, I had all of these goals, but I wasn't willing to put the structure or discipline in place to make it happen. So I had to rewrite my definition literally. I would journal. Discipline equals freedom. It feels so good to be disciplined daily. And I would have to like try to command my cells to have a different experience with the word. And then it began for me with working out, which I had never. I mean, shit, you get 20-year-old metabolism and you're like, I can eat and do anything I want. And then I hit 30 and oh, where'd this 40 pounds come from? And so it started with the discipline of moving my body. And it wasn't just about how I looked, but it was really how I felt. I was like, wow, I feel so much better. And so that became truly a discipline for me. And I have fallen off. And there may be a week where I'm like, I've done nothing I feel good or productive about, but there's always been a coming back to. I've never strayed since then for too long because I just know how sacred it is for my experience as a human on the planet that I, move my body. Also, my meditation practice, but I've been reflecting that sometimes I don't sit down to meditate. Sometimes it's just really taking meditative moments, being more conscious of my breathing. To me, I really have made consciousness a habit. It's not just a company, it's not just a podcast, it's also a practice. And there's a formula for conscious habit that is presence, awareness, and ownership. So there's always sort of this awareness of like, what am I feeling in this moment? Oh, I feel jealous. Oh, that's interesting. Bringing some presence to that. Like, oh, why is that there? What was pushed within me? Curiosity. Learning how to take the ego story away, because the ego loves to create like, can you believe she said this? Can you believe? And then just bringing love to the situation. The conscious habit is probably my most sacred, but I'm able to be there more often when I'm being conscious with my breathing, when I'm being conscious with moving my body. And I think like you too, Des, it's learning. I thank you for that reflection, because I'm like, yeah, you know what? Every day I'm listening to the Mel Robbins podcast per Des. Des can quote all. She's like, Mel Robbins. We're going to manifest Mel Robbins on the podcast, by the way.
Let's do that.
Yeah, we're putting that out into the universe, speak it into existence. But learning,
I better put her on my vision board.
why is she not? I can't.
Right.
I mean, we're getting off this podcast right now, and you're going to go put her on your vision board. TSRW, Des. Come on.
That's right. That's right.
But years ago, I stopped watching the news. I bet you probably have stopped watching it long before I did. And I stopped watching reality TV, and I started consuming better content, because we become, who we hang out with, and who we hang out with can be the voices in our ears too when it comes to podcasts and TV. So I would say, long rant for me to say, moving my body, being conscious in some form or fashion. Oftentimes it's meditation, but not always. And learning. Those are my big three.
Those are good. Amy, you caught my attention. I know that for you, that defensiveness that you had, around like structure and all of that. Because I think that a lot of our listeners, I have friends who have said, I don't do goals. Like I don't. It's just that's not their thing, and I fully support that. I respect that for them. And I'm curious, like, what was it that tipped you in a direction of wanting to create, you know, maybe it didn't start with habits, but some structure to have a different outcome.
At least my process has been, I don't know if this resonates with you, Des, or the listeners, but I've always had to get tired of my own shit before I make a change or do something different. I just have to be so exhausted with myself that I'm like, all right, that's it. I'm done. Like, I'm done screwing around. I'm done making excuses. Pretty much every time it's kind of come to that for me, where I just get tired of my own shit.
So the rebellious one got rebellious about herself.
Right. Eventually, I'm like, all right, enough is enough. What about for you? Was it more gradual? Maybe, maybe not as abrupt as how I operate. What's been your process?
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about like kind of what gets in people's way. There's a little bit of probably underlying is I can be I'm a middle child too, can be rebellious. A lot of people are, oh, you're so zen. Like, no, I'm not.
I've seen the Cuban come out.
I've got to override the inside instinct. The Cuban comes out, and I can be strong-willed and hard-headed. So I'm sure there's a bit of that in the formula. And for me, it's like I get to why and purpose. And for those that are thinking, hey, I do want to create some habits, to me, that's the first step. Why would this be important to you? What is it that you want to have because of this? And what are the consequences if I don't? What's the price I'm paying? Those things are, to me, it's like, that's the motivator, the compeller. There was a great, I think it was a Nike commercial years ago, and it showed a woman in bed, and her Nike shoes are there, and she's like, her alarm goes off, and you can tell she's supposed to be getting up to run. And this voice, and I loved it because it was like, it had a Latino accent. You don't have to run. You had a salad. And I'm like, and it's like, you got to have something that's louder voice wise than that. Come on, you had a salad. That's going to override that and say, I hear you, and this is what I want to be, do, or have.
Yes, because you are absolutely right. It's gonna creep in. We have to have a bigger purpose. And the thing is, if we're honest with ourselves, we have a ton of habits in our day. You have a ton of them. Like your entire day, 95% of our day is spent with our unconscious running the show, which means there are these patterns, these habits that you do whether you're conscious of them or not. And so are they working in your favor or against you? And you don't have to be a goal setter. What's the stat, Jess? I might it's something like less than 16% of the world have goals. I think people often confuse like to-do list tasks with goals, but truly like big dreams, goals, less than 16%. I think it's less than 4% write them down and less than 1% review them on a regular basis.
Yeah. And the stats of accomplishing those things is huge when you do write them down and you review them.
And TSRW. And build the habits around. That's the thing, is like it's sort of the transition of like there's dreams, and then how do you put dreams into goals, and then how do you put goals into habits, and then how do you keep your habits as consistent as possible, and review and reflect and change what needs to be changed. It can sound a little exhausting, but in truth it's like us harnessing the power. I heard a friend who was speaking once say, you're either a part of your plan or someone else's. And to me, these habits are, a way of us being a part of our own plan today and, for the future.
I love that. Yeah. We were going to talk, Amy, about struggles, maybe that we've had, and how ways that we've overcome them, or maybe we've coached folks who've overcome struggles. What have been struggles that you've had in the past when it relates to habits?
Just starting, I've had so much faith in future Amy that I'm like, Monday, come Monday,
Yeah.
I'm going to be a different human with different motivations and a different palate. I'm going to eat different. It's just, I think it's always that the someday never comes. And so, yeah, just getting started. Des, you strike me as someone who's sort of naturally disciplined. So have you had different struggles, or have you dealt with that too?
I absolutely have struggled with getting started. I I am, yes, I am very disciplined. I think it comes from being an athlete, like almost literally my entire life. However, yes, I have big struggles when it comes to getting started. So, for me, it's getting back to first, why am I doing this? Did I decide that I wanted to do this, or did I think that it's something that I should all over myself to do? Right? So I have to be very intrinsically motivated. And then when it comes to getting started, you mentioned different ways that we can do that, like through things we already do. So I know both of us have read Atomic Habits, great book, and James Clear talks about habit stacking. So what do you always do that's a part of who you be? You know, coffee, I know, is your jam. So, and for me, for years it was tea. Now I'm doing coffee. You're going to go to the coffee pot. So if you want to, let's say, start taking supplements on a daily basis, put your supplements there. And it's like, if you're already doing something, that it just makes that activation energy so much easier.
I love that. Like, yeah, that is the look throughout your day and are like, what are the things I'm not going to skip, because I don't really argue with myself about it. I don't have to have there is no voice coming over saying you had a salad yesterday. Instead you're like for me, yes, there is not. I will never negotiate with myself about whether I should have coffee or not unless I am ill. Otherwise, it's happening. I'm never going to negotiate with myself of like, should I brush my teeth today? Do I have time for that? Like, I'm going to sacrifice being a minute and a half to 2 minutes late, or I don't know, 3 minutes if my dentist asks. I'm not really sure what my, but I'm not going to sacrifice that. So if I know that's a non-negotiable, I love that. Like, you want to take a supplement, you suck at taking supplements or remembering, put it by something else. I think my part of my getting started, I love the habit coupling because I think that's great. I'm a guilty of like creating too many goals at one time and thinking I can start all the habits at one time. And so, that one chunk at a time is great. I've had to learn how to not wait for motivation to come, because that's sort of this false thing that we believe we're going to feel like doing something. Like, I just don't feel motivated to work out. The amount of times I said that in my life. And I realized that like motivation is an after effect of action, because an object in motion stays in motion. And so you're not going to feel motivated. And Jess Sims, who Des and I both adore, she is she is the instructor on Peloton. Let's be
On Peloton.
clear.
That's right.
um, but she will say, ready is an action, not a feeling. And so that is true. Like the days that I truly don't want to get up and work out. Des and I had this. We were in Mexico on a site visit for our next High Vibe Tribe retreat. Link in the show notes. But we're each other's accountability partners to get there. So I think getting started is like not waiting for the feeling, because the feeling is often an after effect of the action. And also the accountability of just like, is there somebody who's there already, or I know has my back when I want to make excuses? They're going to give me the kick I need to help keep me on track. So thank you for being that for me in so many areas of life.
Yeah. Well, likewise. And as I told you at the gym at 6 a.m. yesterday, I wouldn't have been there had you not said, I'll be in the gym at 6:30.
Yes.
Oh,
And it's still an us goal, right? It's not like I'm not now doing it for you, but it's like, and I love that reflection of like, who are you doing it for? That's such a great reflection. Am I really doing this for me? Or is it because society makes me think I should want to meditate? I should want to, but is this genuinely something for my well-being? And then that accountability is just like group love and support to get us there. We are community, we have a tribal instinct. We need to really leverage that.
absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said too about like, there's a little bit of the essence of like, make it easy, for yourself. And that goes along with, making it a part of what you're already doing, that obviousness.
What do you do because you mentioned you fall off, and I think that's very common. It's easy to beat ourselves up and feel like we have to be all or nothing. But what's been your sort of relationship with that, like sliding back, kind of the reverting back to old things, and how have you gotten yourself back on track?
Yeah. So I love having that tribalism. So if it's something that I have done and I've reverted back, then making it an accountability um, practice with someone else or a group. Another thing that I like to do, if it's something I'm really struggling with incorporating, I will time activate it. So I'll set a reminder or put it in my calendar, because candidly, like some habits that I'm working on, I've said I'm going to do the habit, and then like life's and I'm like lifing me, and I'm like, oh my god, it's been a week. I haven't even thought about it. So that act of reflecting back to is a motivator for me. And remember what you said you wanted. Any other tips on how do you revert back to your habit if you've fallen off?
I think it's so good for us to just reflect and be like, what have my patterns been? Because if we've been successful in something else, it's likely that we could make that happen in this area too. For me, I'm almost like, okay, well, what makes me fall off? Is it because I'm out of my routine? Is it because I got bored with it? Because honestly, I like variety. And like sometimes, we're still using exercise as an example. Maybe it's like, I've been doing the same thing. I need to change it up. So I look back often and being like, what is my formula for kind of staying on track? Because I have it already. How do I just leverage that instead of trying to create something new? So, okay, I need a 30-day challenge. That's something that always keeps me on track. If I have a 30-day, like no drinking 30 days, workout every day for 30 days, record a video every day for 30 days, I need to get myself in the habit of daily to get myself back on track. That's one of mine. Another one is finding out newer, different ways to track metrics because my brain loves the dopamine hit of tracking. Ooh, I'm a dopamine fiend. I'm like, check, check. So, whether that technology is you've got the Aura Ring, I use my Apple Watch, and also Peloton has these things too. So there's something that keeps me going is looking at my streak on Peloton. And at one point in time, I had a 42-week streak going. And I think I went out of town and it went away and I was pissed. I was like so salty. I was a little baby stomping my feet. So now I've got like a 10-week streak going and I'll be like, I'll be damned if I lose my streak again.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. But that's a great point, Amy. There's so many different tools we can use that have mastered gamification and that dopamine hit that can help us with those productive, healthy, whatever habits that we'd like to create for ourselves. You made me think of BJ Fogg, tinyhabits.com. He's also written a book. And in creating habits, he realized he was like struggling. Actually, in researching habits to write a book about it, he realized he was struggling to create some of his own habits. And the system that he came up with was create micro habits. So instead of like, if maybe the habit is so big that it would make more sense to just chunk it down. And in the book, he talks about flossing your teeth. And he said, instead of proclaiming you're going to floss your teeth every night, just floss one tooth. And that, just doing that got me into the habit of flossing my teeth because I was like, okay, like it's so blindingly obvious. How could I not do this? I'm going to floss one tooth. And what do? You're already in there. Might as well do. I got two. I'll go get the other one.
We should send this to our dentist. We're sharing all of our good hygiene habits on a.
Right.
That's so
Exactly.
good.
So a little, micro habit.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Like, go outside, take one step, and then, oh, okay, that leads to two, and then maybe three. And then it doesn't feel so daunting to say, like, I'm going to walk for 30 minutes. It's like, I'm just going to go outside with the intention of taking one step. And that motion, that's so smart. The motion, objects in motion stay in motion. So you really are like using the nature of humans to help get yourself going. I love that. And that breakdown of if we kind of break down that habit loop, that our belief systems influence our judgments motivate action, actions create results, and results reconfirm the belief. And so if it's like, that's hard, I can't do that, I don't have what it takes, I'm not focused enough, I'm not disciplined enough, like my example, I'm not disciplined enough, the judgment when it comes to doing the thing that's good for us is going to be, not today. It's not good timing. I've got this to do. I've got that to do. I really, I don't have the time. We're going to talk ourselves out of it because the belief is fighting hard to be proven true. And the magic within that, we've all thought for a long time, like if I can just tell myself to think differently, I will. Well, that's part of the process is like the acknowledgement of what the thoughts are. That's part of it. But the bigger trump card is the action because the action creates a new result, which rewires the belief system. This is how we are able to, our bias, our natural bias that we might have towards people or places or, whatever it might be. A new action, creating a new experience can be like, I was all wrong. And it can create an instant rewiring. So I think for anybody listening that, just be mindful of if you want to rewire the belief, fake it till you make it only works so long. We've got to take the action and prove that we're capable and it's possible. For me, working out, I remember going to the gym and being like, I didn't die. What? What? My belief was if I work out, I'm gonna just kill over. And I mean, just like the experience was like, oh, I was all wrong about this.
Yeah, that's a really cool example of growth mindset.
Yeah, good point. Another great book, Mindset by Carol Dweck. You mentioned the tiny habits, one tooth at a time. knowing your why to get started. Is there anything else in that process of I want to be somebody who has better habits? Anything else that you would break down or recommend for listeners?
I I do think it's important to extend grace to yourself because if you do struggle with maintaining or you revert back or like me, it's like, oh, I said I was going to do this and it's been 3 weeks and I forgot. That you always have the opportunity to begin again. And so that's when you can, pull in some of these other things that will help you to be successful, whether it's make it easy, find an accountability buddy, put it in your calendar, use an app, reward yourself one step at a time.
What great advice. We are humans. We cannot be perfect. We're not here to be perfect, right? We're here to just make progress and learn and understand and grow and not be assholes. Des, any additional books that you might recommend to listeners? We mentioned James Clear, Atomic Habits, which is a great listen as well if you're an Audible fan. You mentioned Tiny Habits, and who was the author of that again?
That's BJ Fogg.
Anything else come to mind as far as listens or reads that you might recommend?
Duhigg has a great book.
Yeah, that's a fascinating. Charles Duhigg's book is a fascinating, just about society's habits, like how toothpaste became a thing, and looking at like the marketing dynamic and how there's been able to create societal habits based on how things were positioned. It's really a fascinating read. Okay, so on all episodes, typically I do 3 takeaways. It's often sort of after I get to go back, listen to the episode, or I'm taking notes during and, get to go back and do 3 takeaways, but I would love to do that together, Des. I took all kinds of notes. I've gotten some really good nuggets from you. So, what are some of your takeaways from today?
So I'll quote James Clear. We don't rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. So create some easy, like maybe use some James or use some BJ Fogg. Make it so blindingly simple of a system that that's your hack. You almost can't do it because it's so damn simple. That ease, that simplicity it's kind of a winning formula for creating a new habit. That's one.
I liked your question, who's it for? Just kind of starting at the beginning of why am I doing this? What's my motivator? What happens if I don't do it? And who is this for? I think that curiosity is really healthy in us ensuring that we're all in. That doesn't mean we're perfect, but meaning we're like really motivated towards wanting to make this happen, regardless of how we feel in the moment.
And I would say as well, kind of ties in with that is if we can think of what it is we want to create habit wise, is it something that is temporary or is it something that you want to make a part of who you be? I think that can be a big compeller to knowing what are those foundational things, because from that place, it's going to help you in all the other aspects of your life. And so a lot of our foundational habits, if you will, help us to like create the impact that we bring to the world. They help us to be in relationship the way that we want to be. It helps us in, the work that we do. It helps us in all these other ways.
My hope for all of our listeners here today is that you have one nugget that you take away. If you're like, I keep falling off my habit and it's because I was just waiting for motivation. Okay, I've got to realize ready is an action, it's not a feeling. Or I was so on and off that I got frustrated and being like, I got to bring compassion and empathy to myself. If it is like, I've been trying to go it alone and I live with people who don't have these same habits, I need to find a tribe of people who do so I can have some accountability. That there's one thing you can take away that can help instill in the habits that you have so that you, to Des's point, are a better you from the inside out for it. That, our foundational habits, Des and I talked about, God, I can't even imagine what life would look like if I didn't have those sacred practices.
Yeah, I can't imagine, and I don't really wanna know.
So I told somebody in all seriousness, I was like, if somebody offered me millions of dollars to never meditate again, I would tell them to F off. It has just made that big of a difference in my life, and it's like that's irreplaceable, that having that inner peace, so that those habits that just make you feel more you, it's the ripple effect of all that is good, and know that you have nothing to prove. You don't need the habits to prove you're good or strong, or they just allow you to connect more to your being so you can amplify that doing. Ooh, great conversation, Des. Great idea to have this habits as our kickoff. Thank you so much. I'm so excited for the listeners to continue to hear your wisdom on the podcast.
I am too, and speaking of our tribe, let us know other things that you'd love for us to talk about.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Habit Podcast. If you dug this episode, we'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you're into this consciousness thing, if you like this conversation and you want to meet more like-minded people, head on over to Facebook and join the Conscious Habit community. Until next time, do the world a favor and go love yourself.